I'll call the September 17th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting to order, and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. And if everyone would stand, can I have Commissioner Elmore can lead us? Today is Constitution Day, actually, so when you recite your pledge, keep that in mind. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, staff, roll call, please.
All commissioners are present this evening.
Great, thank you. And this is item number 4, public comments. And this is the time we'll take public comments on matters that are not on the agenda, that are generally within the purview of the Planning Commission. If you wish to speak, please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Additionally, please call 949-270-8165 to provide public comments on non-agenda items. First, we'll go to the community room. Do we have any public comments on non-agenda matters in the community room?
Yes, you do. This is Chair Weigand.
Yes, sir.
Planning Commission, this is Jim Mosher. And I actually have a non-agenda comment that I plan to give to you.
Mr. Mosher, can you hold on one sec? Is there a volume, or it kind of sounds slightly pixelated? We okay to go, or? Please fix it. Okay, try it again, Mr. Mosher.
Yes. Thank you. I think it's even worse, but anyway, what I was trying to say is I have a comment I planned to give to you when you were scheduled to meet last month, and I've since given it to the City Council, and I think it's still relevant to you. Tonight you will be reviewing legislation, but more commonly, you rule on private applications for development. When those matters come before you, you hear from the applicant, sometimes from opponents, and throughout the conversation, you rely on the city staff to provide impartial, objective analysis of whether the proposal comports with the city policies. You may recall a few months ago you heard an appeal, or you heard an application for a parking structure at 215 Riverside in the Mariners Mile area. That application was appealed to the City Council, and the City Council decision was appealed to the Coastal Commission. When that happens, the full record goes to the Coastal Commission for evaluation by their own staff and their own objective analysis. One would assume it is up to the private applicant to make their case before that new tribunal, and they did. But in this case, you may be interested to know the city staff also took it upon themselves to compose a 6-page letter supporting the applicant, trashing the appeal, and suggesting there was no other possible way to look at the matter. I find this troubling because many, I know, members of the public come away from these Planning Commission hearings with the impression that at some point during the review process, the staff shifts from being neutral evaluators to being active advocates for the private applicants. When they act as they did in this matter and in others before the Coastal Commission, taking a role of partisan advocates, it's very hard for the public to have any other impression, which I think is unfortunate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Did all the commissioners pick most of that up? I was having a little trouble, but I want to kind of see if everyone was having the same difficulty on that feedback, or could everyone hear for the most part? For the most part. Yeah, so I don't know if staff, if that could be adjusted for the remainder of the meeting. Yeah, I think that's only fair. As long as every commissioner is comfortable with that and staff is comfortable with it, I don't want to, upset any guidelines that exist. Yeah, that would be great. Maybe if there's, maybe one person can identify at a time, that would be good. Or each person, yes, sir. Maybe one at a time. Yeah, that's what I mean, yeah. So if one comes in at a time, you seat them, and then we can kind of adjust from there. But seeing that there's only two, maybe a staff person could kind of keep an eye on that area. Yeah, I think that's helpful. Sorry, Mr. Mosier, for being the guinea pig on that, but I think we all picked up what you were saying. Staff, you were able to identify that as well? Okay. All right, so let's give just a few moments if the members of the public wouldn't mind heading over to the remainder of this room. And then I'll ask staff while we're doing that if there's anyone on the phone. Okay, we don't have any phone public comments. And I'll move on to the next item because I don't believe there are any, but staff, are there any requests for continuances?
Mr. Chair, I want to highlight for you and the public of the item number 2. It's not really a continuance, but this is an item that's on the agenda, but we're actually, it's been removed from the calendar, but we left it here because it was partially noticed. So this item won't be considered tonight. So if anyone on the phone or at home is looking to comment on item number 2, it has actually been removed from the agenda, and we will not be commenting on this. It'll come back to the commission at a later date, and it'll be provided notice.
Okay, so when we get to that, I'll still report that out.
Certainly.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So seeing that there are no requests for continuances other than what we'll discuss here on item 2 later, I'll move on to item number 6 on the consent items. That's item number 1, minutes of the July 23rd, 2020. And I will see if there's any comment on that. If you do have any comment, again, that phone number is 949-270-8165. And I do believe we have some comments from Mr. Mosier on the minutes. Does anyone have any discussion on that or want to make a motion? Oh, yes, I do have a phone call, actually, for this particular item. Okay, you're on.
I'm commenting on the public comment section. Oh, yeah, you have a phone call.
Yes, we had just finished that item. However, I'll allow you to make comments if you would kindly turn off your television, though, so that we can not have the echo.
Yes. Hello, my name is Charles Caldwell. I live in Bay Shores, and in reviewing the staff report for tonight's third story ordinance, I think there's one thing that's missing, and that is what's happening is the merger.
Excuse me, sir, the item hasn't been heard yet, but it will be very shortly. Would staff be able to place him on hold and let us? Okay, yeah, you'll have to call back,
okay.
Unfortunately, because that is out of order. And when you'd said comments, I thought you were referring to general comments that were not part of any agenda item. So I apologize.
Well,
if you wouldn't mind calling us back. I don't think there's a long queue for that, so I think you'd be fine. Thank you. Okay, so moving back on to that consent calendar item with Mr. Mosier's comments, does any commissioner want to make a motion to either move forward with the minutes as is or with the edits?
I'll make a motion for approval with the edits from Mr. Mosier.
I'll second that.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Call the vote, please.
The motion carries unanimously.
Great. We'll move on to the public hearing items, and that was, as Mr. Campbell reported out, the item number 2, Brockhouse Residence Edition, PA 2020-116 at the site location of 1521 Sylvia Lane. That item has been removed for the agenda due to a noticing issue, and it will not be discussed this evening. future consideration of this project will require a new notice. So I'll move on to the next item. That is item, do we need to vote on that, or are we okay? No?
You don't need to vote on
Perfect.
that
Okay,
item.
great.
Thank you.
And so moving on to the next item, this is item number 3, Residential Design Standards Code and LCP Amendments, PA 2019-070, and the site location is citywide. Again, if you do want to comment on this item, please call 949-270-8165. Again, that's 949-270-8165. And staff, before you go forward, it looks like there are a couple more people in the community room. So if they are interested in speaking on these items, I will direct a staff person to help due to the microphone issue. But if the mayor of the city wants to take a bow, we do. Okay, I'm getting cut off. All right, but if there are any other speakers in the community room, the microphone has an issue, so we're allowing folks inside this room at a social distance level. So staff, go for it.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Wagon, members of the Commission. My name is Jaime Murillo, and tonight be presenting an update to the zoning code and local coastal program amendments related to residential design standards. This is an item that was brought before the Planning Commission on May 7th, and the decision at that meeting was to remove the item from calendar to allow staff additional time to try to reach out to the state to determine whether or not these amendments were in fact in compliance with a recent state law, SB 330, or the Housing Crisis Act. So staff did receive an update and a determination from the state. We've also made a few modifications to the proposed revisions, which I'll share with you. But I thought it'd be important to kind of just remind everyone how we got to this point. This is something that was actually initiated by the City Council back in May of 2019 as a result of a number of comments and concerns a lot of the council members were receiving from members of the community, specifically related to the recent design of single-family and two-family dwellings that are constructed in the city that appear out of scale and a lot taller and bulkier than what the community was used to prior to our city's zoning code update in 2010. So at that study session meeting in May, the City Council initiated this amendment. They also initiated an amendment related to the preservation of beach cottages. We took that on a separate tract. That was reviewed by the Planning Commission and ultimately approved by the City Council. And that's currently under review by the Coastal Commission. But when I'm talking about what happened in 2010 in the zoning code, probably the biggest factor was how we measure height. And as you see on the slide, on this left-hand column, this is how we measured height prior to 2010. So our height limits, for the most part, have remained the same for R1 and R2 zoning districts, which is 24 feet for flat roofs and 29 feet for sloping roofs. However, for sloping roofs, we had a provision that the midpoint of that sloping roof plane could not exceed 24 feet. We also had a very difficult standard to review, which was an imaginary projection of that roof plane. That resulted in extremely long plan check review times. It was complicated for the community to understand. But essentially what was resulting from that code was kind of a mass similar to the home on the bottom of this slide, where that third floor was really squeezed in the middle of the property, and it was really difficult to try to get a covered third floor deck. One of the major goals of that 2010 zoning code update was to try to streamline our development review process and remove some of the complexities from our code. And so we maintained the same 24-foot, 29-foot height limit. However, instead of measuring the midpoint of a sloped roof, we included a standard that sloped roof must have a minimum 3 and 12 pitch. And knowing that that could expand the building envelope, the code did include what I'm referring to as bulk controls. And so the enclosed area of a third floor was required to be stepped back an additional 15 feet from the front and rear setbacks to try to control the bulk of that third floor area. Additionally, we applied a maximum third floor area limits, and it ranges from 15 to 20% depending on the lot width. And the goal is to, again, on the bottom of the slide, you'll see a photo of a house that generally complies with this, the intent of these standards. Unfortunately, the standards do not apply to covered decks. It only applies to enclosed spaces. So what we're starting to see is a proliferation of large covered third floor decks that aren't being pulled back from the building edges. We also revised the definition of floor area for simplicity. Unfortunately, that now allowed for unfinished attics to be excluded from third floor area step backs, as well as area calculations. It was also silent on how open a covered deck should be. And so we're starting to see decks that are a lot more enclosed and very bulky. And the other problem is that these standards don't apply, these bulk controls, don't apply to Balboa Island as a whole. It doesn't apply to development within the RM or multiple residential zoning districts. And it doesn't apply to lots that are zoned R2 that are 25 feet wide or less. And so here's just a couple pictures of some of these problems. So on the top left, you'll see this is a covered third floor deck that comes all the way out to the front building facade. From the street, it looks like a big 3-story building, but that's all covered deck that comes right out to the front. On the top right, that's a covered deck with limited openings. Again, technically this counts as open under the current code, but visually it's bulky. And another problem we're having is it's very easy to enclose after the fact. Once these permits are finalized, those little openings are easy to just slap some windows in. As you can see, someone's done on that bottom right slide or picture. And again, it's not always applicable. So on the picture on the bottom left, that's a duplex in Corona Del Mar on an RM lot. There's no third floor step backs on this property or on the side. So this is one of the problem, homes that have come up and identified to the council. We've spent a lot of time working on these amendments. As I mentioned, it was initiated by the council back in May. We began working on our amendments, and we had our first community meeting back in August. We refined the code and updated the council in September of last year, where we received some further direction from our city council. We continue to work on the amendments, and we held a second community meeting last March. And then, as I mentioned, we had a planning commission meeting back in May. Since then, we've consulted with HCD, and we've received a letter of determination, which I'll go through later in my presentation. Our city attorney's office has conducted additional review of the amendments as well. And I've reached out and I've had some conversations with some community members and designers, which have resulted in further refinements to the proposed code. And so I'll go through the code as proposed today. But I just want to remind everyone, this is not a comprehensive overview or overhaul of our design standards. This is really focused on addressing those unintended consequences from the 2010 zoning code update. There's no changes in any allowed heights that were previously allowed. This amendment won't prohibit covered decks. It's really just trying to limit how large they are and pull back the massing from the more visible front and side edges. And what's really important for staff to point out is implementing any of these standards would not result in any changes in allowed floor area that a property owner could have achieved prior to these amendments. And this is one of the reasons we went back and revised the standards that apply to the RM zone to really make sure we're not impacting anyone's ability to achieve floor area. So these amendments are really broken up into 3 components. The first is related to third floor limits. The second is a clarification of gross floor area. And the third applies to the applicability. And so I'll go through each of these independently. So on this slide, you'll see how these amendments would change from the current code to what's being proposed. On the column on the left-hand side, you can see in that middle row a drawing of a dwelling where the first and second floor can completely eat up the buildable area. On the third floor, our code says that enclosed floor area must be stepped back a minimum of 15 feet from the front and rear step backs. And so the area in green represents kind of the enclosed floor area. And it's subject to that additional 15 to 20% area limit. But the current code does not apply to covered decks. So what you see shaded in blue is theoretically how far a covered deck can go. And the picture on the bottom left, you can see a home which kind of meets that. That front element is all covered deck that goes all the way to the front setback line and visually adds a lot to the bulk of the resident. So the proposed amendment tonight recommendation is to apply the step backs to not only the enclosed floor area, but also to covered deck area. And so the intent is to pull back that mass shown in the blue shading again behind those 15-foot step backs, and also apply an additional 50% coverage limit, which would apply to both enclosed area and covered deck area. And the hope is we pull back the mass similar to the exhibit on the bottom right. And that's one of the clarifications that are in the code. We had to clarify that coverage limit to make sure we weren't unfairly restricting overhangs that weren't over covered decks or penalizing a third floor area that doesn't count, such as stairs or elevators. So this is really in line with the intent of the code. The other issue on the third floor is the side step backs. So the code does require an additional 2-foot side step back on lots that are wider than 30 feet. Again, this only applies to enclosed third floor area. But because the majority of the lots throughout the city, the standard lot size, especially in Corona del Mar, Balboa Island, the peninsula, is 30 feet, we're not getting the benefit of this additional 2-foot step back. So you can see on the picture on the bottom left, what we're seeing is a vertical wall 3 stories tall, either adjacent to the public street or towering over on adjacent properties, impacting their light and air. So the proposed code is to change that 2-foot step back standard to apply to lots that are 30 feet wide or greater to capture more lots and to make sure this applies in more situations, and to also apply that step back to covered decks as well. And again, the goal is for a design more consistent with the picture on the bottom right. Now, in regards to gross floor area, there's two main things, or three, I guess two main things we're trying to fix. So one, prior to 2010, any covered patio had to be either uncovered or open on 2 sides. And so these slides on the left show a compliant patio that complied with the prior code. The current code's silent on how many openings a covered deck must have. And so it's been interpreted that only one side has to be completely open or 2 sides substantially open. And so what that's really done, again, is resulting in these more bulky designs. It's created these openings that are very easy to enclose with windows. And it also has pulled back those decks away from the front edges and towards the middle edges where it's less visible to the public. So the proposed amendment would change the definition of gross floor area to clarify how open a covered deck must be in order to not count as gross floor area. And essentially it would require 2 sides be open with the exception of minimal structural supports, and that the guardrails must be open construction or glass to provide a visibly more open deck. And these are pictures of what the goal of the amendment would be. The other change that's necessary for gross floor area relates to areas that are unfinished. Currently, any space that's 6 feet or higher that's unfinished doesn't count towards gross floor area. And since it doesn't count towards gross floor area, it's not subject to the third floor step backs or any of the area requirements. So in this picture, you'll see on the top is an elevation of a home in Balboa Island. The area in green is the actual enclosed floor area. The area in blue is the covered deck. But the area shaded in red and enclosed in the box, that's an unfinished attic. But you can see the footprint of the attic is much larger than the enclosed floor area or even the covered deck. And visually, from the public, looks like a full 3rd story level. So the intent of the code would be to eliminate the term finished so that any area, whether it's finished or unfinished, has a ceiling height of more than 6 feet would count towards floor area. And the goal would be so areas that aren't technically supposed to be used as living space would be pushed down, such as that picture on the bottom. And lastly, in terms of applicability, as I mentioned, the current standards don't apply to Balboa Island. And so the 2 pictures on the left of this slide are both in Balboa Island. The one on the top, you can see the 3rd floor is right up against the alley, kind of towering over the alley. The picture on the bottom left, you can see that third floor goes all the way up with no articulation or break in that wall plane. The picture in the top right, this is a home or a duplex in Corona Del Mar on a multi-family zone lot, RM lot. And so no standards applied there in that case. And the picture in the bottom right, this is a property on the peninsula, an R2 lot that's 25 foot wide or less. And you can see there's no articulation whatsoever. It's 3 stories of a flat wall plane. So the change tonight would apply all the standards I just discussed to Balboa Island, including the step backs on the third floor area and covered deck limits, as well as open volume limits. With respect to the R2 lots, 25 feet wide or less, the only thing that would apply, or we're proposing to apply, is only the front and rear step backs. And for the RM lots, the only thing we're proposing to apply is the front, side, and rear step backs. We've since removed the prior recommendation of applying the third floor area and coverage limits. Based on some analysis we did during our break, we discovered there's a unique scenario where RM lots are entitled to additional square footage for enclosed garages, and there's a case where applying the area limits could impact the achievable floor area. So for that reason, we're removing that standard and we're only applying the step backs. And so just to reiterate for the RM, there's not going to be any changes in height as we had once proposed. No third floor area limits. And again, it won't apply to RM developments that include 3 units or more. With regards to SB 330, that law applies and affects different areas of housing law, but as applies to the item before us tonight, the focus is on making sure that we don't change the development standard that would result in a reduction of density. But more importantly is we don't reduce the intensity of development. And in the law, that's kind of spelled out as changes in height, floor area, setbacks, lot coverage, or anything really that's going to affect the potential development potential or density potential on a property. We did reach out to the State Housing and Community Development Department. They reviewed the staff report and correspondence we've submitted to them. They responded with a letter that's in the staff report packets that confirms and has provided a determination that the proposed amendments would not violate SB 330. Further, with the changes I mentioned to the RM lots, we're confident there's no changes in achievable height, setbacks, floor area density. There were some comments received and that the third floor step backs are more like setbacks. However, setbacks are defined in our zoning code and the step backs are not. And this is really an articulation standard, not anything that's going to affect the actual overall buildable area of the property or achievable floor area. And then it does incentivize more density in the RM zone by exempting projects with 3 or more units. And then lastly, the open volume standards, which mostly apply in most cases, simply encourages modulation and it won't impact the development floor area potential. So with that pretty much concludes my report. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt the draft resolution with the recommendations contained within, and then we'll take the matter to the City Council for their final review and action. One of the biggest questions I've been receiving from a lot of the designers and architects is when is this going to apply? And does it apply retroactively to projects that are in the pipeline? So it's going to be staff's recommendation to the City Council that any discretionary applications, such as a coastal development permit that's been submitted and deemed complete prior to the effective date of this ordinance, be allowed to continue under the old rules, or any plan checks that are submitted prior to the adoption of this ordinance also be allowed to continue under the old rules. So that concludes my report and available for any questions.
Thank you, Jaime, for the detailed report. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff at the moment? I'll start with Commissioner Rosine and work my way this way.
Not for staff at this time.
Okay. Anyone have any? Commissioner Getty.
Staff, I commend you on an excellent report and graphics, very easy to follow. There was a sentence or paragraph in here about Newport Heights not exempt.
Oh, yeah, so,
Explain that.
yeah, at the last meeting, we received public comment from Mr. Chris Budnick. He's a board member of Newport Heights Improvement Association, and he had made a comment that, you know, a lot of the complaints the council is receiving relates to areas where the lots are smaller, like Corona Mar, Balboa Island, that they shouldn't apply to Newport Heights where the lots are larger and there isn't this problem. And so I worked with Chris during this break, and I provided some analysis, which we put together and then he distributed to his board. And a lot of the standards currently apply. So Newport Heights consists of R1 and R2 lots, but they're much larger. They're 45 feet wide by 127.5 feet deep. It's rare that a home actually maxes out their floor area potential, and it's pretty rare to find three-story development in Newport Heights, mostly because they have the area. There's really not a need to try to fit all that square footage in a three-story development. They have room to spread. And so we went through and analyzed the potential for these amendments on like 5 recent developments that are kind of scattered throughout the area. And we found that for the most part, they wouldn't impact any of the recent developments except for one home. It would impact a third floor covered deck that they had. They would have had to pull it back like an additional 6 feet or something. But it does apply to Newport Heights, but I think his comment was that Newport Heights should be exempt.
Any other questions of staff for the moment? Okay, and my notes say ex parte communications, but since it's a staff-driven item, is that something I call on still?
Typically, those are for public hearing items. This is actually a public hearing,
Sure.
so I don't think it would hurt to
Okay,
go ahead and
sure.
specify
I'll
those.
start with Commissioner Rosine.
None.
Commissioner, okay.
None.
None for me.
None for me.
A few people in the community and emails.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I've had some emails sent, some calls from residents on both sides of the issue. Okay, and I will open the public hearing, and the commissioners will take public comment on this item. If you're watching remotely and want to provide comments, the phone number again is 949-270-8165. And first, we'll take comments in-house.
Thank you again, Chair Wigand, members of the Planning Commission. Hopefully this is a little more intelligible. I wanted to begin by saying that I do feel that the third floor massing is a problem in Newport Beach, and I support staff's solution for that generally. As I explained in writing, I am concerned, though, about the consistency of this with SB 330, despite the letter that the city got from HCD. And I would direct you to page 154 of the agenda packet, where you will see highlighted there the relevant passage from SB 330. And the lower highlighting is things that are verboten for a city to do. And one of those is to impose new or increased setback requirements. Now, Jaime is saying step backs are not setbacks. I tried to research with Google what step backs are. It's not a very common term. One would think it means that when a wall goes up, you have to step back a certain amount. But in this case, as proposed in our code, which is actually on page 65 of the red line version. I think I'm looking at the current one. We've had these step backs for some time. They're being applied to certain areas of the city where they did not apply before. And it says you're adding 15 feet from the front or rear setback lines. So this is an additional and increased setback. So I am concerned anybody who wanted to challenge this would not have too much trouble explaining to a court that a step back is a subspecies of a setback and something that a city is not supposed to do for the next 5 years. I also am a little skeptical of the assertion that nothing in this is reducing the potential for floor area, which is actually not one of those highlighted things. It says you can't change floor area ratio. It doesn't say you can't reduce floor area. But it's among the things you're being asked to do here is to change the definition of gross floor area to include some things that were never included before. So if the gross floor area is limited and you're counting things that you could never count, didn't have to count before, clearly the potential is going down despite the examples that you're seeing there. So I'm concerned a little bit about that. And then finally, continuing on page 65, the one thing independent of SB 330 that I'm really concerned about is this change, which I've not heard the explanation about, of the transition of lots that are 30 feet wide or not. And you'll see on page 65 that there's two conditions here, third floor limitation, section A. There's a switch when you go to wider than 30 feet, and you look down at B, which is now numbered C. That also switched when in the current code when you went to greater or wider than 30 feet. Now one of them switches at wider than 30 feet, and the other one switches at 30 feet or wider, which is inconsistent between the two. Why we're introducing that inconsistency and making former legal things non-conforming now, I do not know, and it does not seem wise to take what was carefully made to be consistent between the first and last paragraphs and make it inconsistent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Any other public speakers on this? We have 3 phone callers, but Mr. McCaffrey, I think, is here.
My name is Bob McCaffrey. I live at 1410 South Bayfront. I also have another house I own on Coral Avenue. And I didn't know anything about this until about 45 days ago when my architect called me when I built my home 10 years ago or so and said I could no longer build the same home I built. I said, why is this? And then I got to thinking about this, and there's approximately 1,200 lots on Balboa Island. Have never received any letters up until 45 days ago from my architect, no emails. I did find out in the last August 19th of 2019, 64 people showed up for a meeting. Now according to Google, there's 2,600 people living on the island. And the last outreach I understood is August 18th of 2019, March 23rd, 0.01% of the people showed up. I don't see any really outrage on this thing. I think there's a small group of people on Balboa Island that don't want to change things, and they have a right to their opinion. But I have a right to my opinion, too. I think this is really stamping on my property rights. Number one, the home I have on Curl, I may want to build it out someday. This would affect what I can do. You'd be taking things away from me. I don't think that's fair. And number two, maybe I want to sell that, which could affect the cost of the property. So those are my points on property rights. I feel very strongly there's a very small group pushing this issue. It has not been publicized on Balboa Island. I suspect there are tons of people who would oppose this who knew if this was going on. Thank you much.
Thank you. Any other public comments in?
Good evening. My name is Nancy Scarborough. I'm a resident of Newport Beach, and I fully support the recommendation tonight. I think that there are a lot of people who do support this. I'm active in a number of community advocacy groups, SPAWN included, the Good Neighbors, and there's a lot of support for this on a number of levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on this in the chamber?
Charles Globe, Newport Beach. Sorry I'm late. I don't mean to disrespect this proceeding. Like Nancy stated, we completely support the work that the staff, specifically Jaime and group, have done on this amendment, and we support it. Hope that you enact it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have several callers. And again, I'll come back to my cheat sheet here with phone. Oh, sorry. All right. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind muting your television, please.
Sure.
Great, thank you.
Am I up?
Yes, sir.
Oh, hi. My name is Mark Becker. My address is 410 Bellevue Lane at Peninsula Point. I've owned a home in Newport Beach for the past 30 years and have actually worked in Newport Beach as a design professional for the past 40 years, among other places in California. My clients, my neighbors, most people at Peninsula Point all tell me the same thing, that three-story massing has been a huge issue, has impeded our light, our air, and the intimacy of the neighborhood. What is being presented by staff is a positive step in helping reduce mass. Of course, I think the ultimate solution should be a uniform building envelope to help preserve light and air. It was mentioned by a commissioner at the last May meeting that this amendment maybe should apply only to Balboa Island, seeing as that's where the bulk of the letters were coming from. My neighbors and I in Peninsula Point reject that concept and need this amendment implemented for Peninsula Point as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then staff, I'll just read the number one more time for the public. It's 949-270-8165. And we'll take the next caller. Okay, you're on. Just mute your television if you haven't already.
All right.
Okay, you're up. You may proceed.
Good evening, commissioners and city staff. My name is Catherine Martin Walcott, and I'm a member of the Martin family, as well as one of the attorneys for the Martin Family Trust, owner of the 1824 West Oceanfront. The trust is communicating through me this evening rather than through our outside counsel at Cox Castle Nicholson, because we feel that we can accept the amendments as written and recommended by staff in the staff report. While we still feel that there may be a better aesthetic solution to the problem of massing than imposing new unarticulated side setbacks on the third floor, and we tend to agree with Mr. Mosher's legal analysis of that issue, we can accept it in the spirit of compromise and cooperation. However, that acceptance is conditional on there being no further reduction in the RM zoning districts of the buildable enclosed area of the third floor, the permitted maximum floor area ratio, or the size of the covered unenclosed decks. Should any of these elements change at this meeting or at the city council level, I'll have to withdraw our acceptance of the current draft, and Mr. Waite and Cox Castle stand ready to help us all come to an equitable solution. We sincerely appreciate the staff has recognized that the changes proposed at the May 7th Planning Commission meeting would have potentially reduced the floor area ratio currently permitted on our property. This would have raised a significant legal issue, and we hope the issue is not raised tonight or at a later date. Thank you for your time and attention, and please stay well.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next caller, please. Okay, you're on.
Hi, my name is Randy Black. I live on the bayfront on the peninsula, which is one of the most affected areas with respect to this issue. As a Newport Beach native and homeowner, and as a real estate broker and real estate investor for over 30 years, I strongly support these proposed amendments. The amendments have been extensively vetted over the last year and a half and are overwhelmingly popular with property owners. They are endorsed by all three community organizations on Balboa Island: the Balboa Island Improvement Association, the Little Balboa Island Property Owners Association, and the Balboa Island Preservation Association. Multiple city council meetings and public hearings have been held since the city council initiated these amendments. I have attended several myself, and the great majority of residents have consistently shown their strong support. These amendments are necessary to maintain our property values. The existing character of Balboa Island, Corona del Mar, the peninsula, and the other most affected neighborhoods support their high property values. Unfortunately, too many have detracted from this character by building poorly designed, blank, three-story boxes. We need to preserve the unique qualities of our neighborhoods that make them desirable in the first place. We do not want Newport Beach to look like parts of Huntington Beach with their three-story cookie-cutter tall skinnies. All development regulations could be said to restrict the right of a property owner to do exactly as he or she pleases, regardless of the effect on the neighborhood. But one purpose of regulation is to protect the property rights of existing property owners by providing for further development to take place in a manner consistent with existing neighborhood uses. With the approval of these amendments by the California Department of Housing and Community Development and by the Newport Beach City Attorney, any realistic legal concerns have now been dealt with. These proposed amendments are essentially technical corrections to building articulation standards to conform the 2010 design standards to their original intent. They do not reduce a homeowner's available building footprint, structure height, or buildable area. These amendments will help maintain property values and property rights. They are overwhelmingly popular with property owners, and I urge you to approve them and send them on to the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next caller, please. Okay, you're on.
Oh, good evening, Commissioners. This is Jody Bowl. I am the chair of the Balboa Island Preservation Association. And I would like to say that we appreciate all the hard work and your consideration of supporting the 2010 code revisions. I would like to also say that out of our 700 supporters on the island for the Preservation Association, we are not a small group. And this is a huge issue, has been a huge issue for our residents and many residents in Newport Beach. Not only is it creating havoc on the character of Balboa Island and Corona del Mar and many others, it is taking a hard approach on our infrastructure, on our bridges, on our utilities. And I believe if you choose to support this, which I really hope you do, I think you've seen many letters in support of it, that we have no more delays. We believe it's been a loophole for about 10 years. Probably should have never happened and opened the door in the first place, but since it has, it would be very much appreciated if you would support this code revision and not delay it because it's already been delayed for 4 months. And I do know that a lot of builders and designers have been pushing very hard to try to get their plans through and took advantage of the 4 months it did get delayed. So I very much appreciate you considering that not only does a building owner, a property owner have property rights, so do the individuals that have owned properties, that live next to properties that these developments are happening for years and years, sometimes 2 years. And I would say that's much more noise than the short-term rentals have been producing, but yet this has not been getting the attention that it should have had a long time ago. So thank you very much for your time, and I know you will do the right thing. And please protect our Newport Beach. Thank you very much.
Thank you for calling. Next caller, please. Hello, you're on the line, but if you wouldn't mind muting your television, please.
So do the individuals that have owned properties.
Thank you.
That live next to properties that these developments are happening for years and years, sometimes 2 years. And I would say that's much more noise than the short-term rentals have been producing. That yet this has not.
Are you ready, sir?
Yeah.
Okay, great. You're on. You're up now. Sir, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening,
Great.
planning commissioners. My name is Charles Caldwell. I live in Bay Shores, which is an area which has not even been discussed tonight. People talking about the island and the peninsula and Corona del Mar. We have the same situation existing in our neighborhood here as well, and just had 3 mansions pushed through before the code changed because of the delays as well. And my feeling is that it's definitely, I support the amendment to the ordinance, but I also think the city needs to focus on mansionization, which is resulting from the lot mergers that are taking place. This is allowing mansionization even of 2-story residences. And I think that needs to be addressed, maybe separately from this matter, but I think the city needs to look into that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next caller, please. Hello, you're on the line, but if you wouldn't mind muting your television. Hello, are you there? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, yes. Could you please mute your television and then you can proceed?
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me know when it's my turn.
Yes, you're ready to go. You can go.
Hello, this is Brian Jeanette, and I'm just hoping you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Not quite sure that it's all working very well, but my concerns are that this really should be left to the parcels on the Balboa Island and Peninsula Point. The homes in the Heights and other parts of the city really should not be part of the same change to the zoning. And in those areas, in the 30 and 40-foot wide lots, the height limit, even on a second floor, could go to 29 feet, which doesn't result in a reduction of the bulk. So even by leaving the code the way it is, or even changing it, you get that same bulk on the upper level. I believe that Mr. Mosher really hit the button when he talked about the difference between setback and step back in the gross floor areas, and I see that these are potentially in violation of SB 330. I applaud staff's effort in this direction, and I think it should be really looked at more closely with architects that do a lot of work in this area. I have 6 homes that we have done that actually almost meet these criteria completely without even having to change the code. So I, again, applaud Jaime's efforts and Jim's efforts and would be more than happy to be involved with the discussions in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next caller? No more callers. Okay, great. I'll ask staff if they have any comments in response to any of the public comments. None? Okay. Then I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for discussion. I am seeing staff looking around. Are we okay to move forward? Yeah, is there anyone in the community room that wishes to speak on this item? I think we're good. Okay. So the hearing remains closed, and I will ask commissioners for discussion. Silence. Commissioner Lowry.
All right.
Or, sorry, Vice Chair Lowry.
Well, I'll start off. Yeah, and Jaime, you've done such a lot of work on this, and it's a really definitely a complicated issue to go through, and setbacks and everything that entails going through all of this. But I tell you, the problem I have with it is that it's so uniform across the city. And, living on Balboa Island for 3 years, living in more of West Newport for years before that, I just think there needs to be more of a specific set, if you will, for these certain areas. Because Corona del Mar, and I lived in Corona del Mar too, and Balboa Island aren't the same, and maybe not have the same exact problems. The Peninsula, the same thing. West Newport, the same thing. And I think this is too broad of a stroke for me to be able to, in good conscience, say, okay, let's go ahead and make this, sweeping new ordinances across the city, and hope it works for all the different areas within Newport Beach. I know a lot of people have said Newport Beach is they say villages or a bunch of neighborhoods within one city that are fairly eclectic, or at least different than each other little area. And when we do something, to me, so uniform, it takes away from those potential characteristics. And on a other note, I mean, I do see, I'm very cognizant of property issues, and I do see some areas here, at least for me, the way I look at it, that it is limiting current rights, if you will, within the property, within your bundle of rights. When you're buying a piece of property at that time, and here's what you have to do what you please to do with. And I see that, I just, without kind of going through every point, I just see a number of points there that give me concern. And I was going to kind of one little anecdotal thing. Before I came on the Planning Commission, been here for 3.5 years now, comments that just people have said, and just anecdotal comments that, the Planning Commission gives out variances like candy, and this is, it's just people that probably weren't happy with it, but you just kind of, sometimes some generalizations. And I will say my 3.5 years that I've been here, everyone has been very judicious and reads all the material, and any variances that we give out, I think it's been researched by all of my fellow members up here, and sometimes they give variances, and sometimes they don't. So I look at giving a variance, you're giving that person additional property rights. But in this, I see it as we could be, and you can make arguments that we're taking them away from some, and we're not getting as specific, I think, to each neighborhood that might not be appropriate for one neighborhood, that may be appropriate for another neighborhood. So I would like to enter a motion to table this for a further date. Uncertain.
Okay, Commissioner Elmore? Yeah.
I'll, not to be redundant, but I somewhat agree with Commissioner Lowry's statements about the blanket nature of this application. The coastal zone is much more dense. I think what is put in front of us here is very appropriate for the coastal zone. My concern is when you move away from the coastal zone to the larger lots, you take that advantage away from those homeowners in those other locations. And so to put a blanket over the entire city for one proposal, one ordinance, when it has effects positive on some side, negative on the other, I think we should take a look at bifurcating this into different zones, because I think the applicable nature of what is being discussed is appropriate for the coastal zone. My concern with it is once the train leaves the station, that probably won't come back. And so I think if we could take a look at that first, we could do it right and satisfy what I think is best for all property owners in the city. I'll second that motion.
I do have a motion and a second, but I'd like to entertain any more comments from the commission. Commissioner Klostermeyer?
Yeah, just a question of staff. If this is something that we look at in different areas of the city, right now there's one zoning that is in place for all of these different neighborhoods that we're talking about. How would you even apply something like that? Would you need to create a new zone?
Commissioner Klostermeyer, you're right. It would get cumbersome to parse this out by geographies. In fact, that would not be staff's recommendation, but obviously, the commission, if there's a consensus, that could be a recommendation. But we would we would have to create geographic different standards, and that makes the code more complicated and opens up to more potential errors, if you will. But it can be done if that's indeed what the commission wants to see, and or the council wants to do. But we're looking for a more uniform approach because the issue seems to be applicable across the board in these R1, R2 districts.
I would just add that I think staff has put together a great presentation. I appreciate the diligence that you've done going back to HCD to discuss if this is in violation of anything with SB 330. Thank you for that. I think that what is being proposed here does a good job of addressing a lot of the massing that we're seeing that I think is starting to deteriorate the character of some of the neighborhoods. I understand the point that's being made about this maybe not needing to apply to all geographical areas, but generally I am supportive of what staff has presented to us today.
Thank you. Commissioner Rosine.
So, I'd like to start off by saying that I think, you've done a great job of producing a set of code that makes sense for the community. And while I understand Vice Chair's and Commissioner Elmore's concerns, I think this is the right thing for the community. And I'd like to make an alternative motion to approve this design standards and LCP amendment, if that's possible.
Yeah, just to find, usually a table motion is not really debatable, isn't it? It's usually just a up or down vote. If I'm just so that way,
Fair enough.
yeah, it's usually a non-debatable
We can
motion.
check with our attorney on the Robert Rules of Order on that.
If we do have it's very unique to have a tabled motion. So if I understand correctly, we can do a couple of different things. But if we have a substitute motion that's been presented to the body, and you can certainly make a motion to cut off debate if you don't want any further debate on it and decide on that. But if we have a substitute motion that's been made, and if there's a second on that, then we would entertain it. So if we get a second on that, then we could consider that.
Chair Weigand, I would second Commissioner Rosine's motion.
Okay, so let's just, I want to be fair to all the commissioners on this. So you're saying that debate has to be closed now, or?
So we had a motion and a second to
Yes.
close off debate. There was not, I'm sorry, to table it. There was not an actual vote on it. We got a substitute in the interim. If we have a second on that, we could consider the substitute motion.
Okay, and do we take that motion now, or it appears Commissioner Keding wishes to speak, so I want to play fair. So does he have the right to speak now, or do we have to call for that vote?
If there is no motion to cut off debate and to consider his additional comments, then we could do that. We can only have two motions on the table, however, at any given time.
So Commissioner Keding can speak right now? Okay.
If that's the will of the
I just
body.
want to make sure that, yeah, you're good.
All my years in here, usually, correct me. By the way, I can barely hear you down there. Listen to the attorney, if they could turn your mic up. Alternatively, generally, the alternate motion trumps the original motion, but I had a question from the original motioner, if I may. I never got a chance to bring it up. If Commissioner Lowry, tell me the different areas that you would bifurcate this to. Go ahead.
You have Balboa Island would be one, Corona del Mar, Peninsula, yeah, just the coastal zone, and then as you go up kind of more in West Newport, or go up in kind of as you're going down by Superior and PCH and up the hill there. I mean, there's just a lot of differences in architectural type and in lot sizes. So it seems to just blanket.
That's the coastal zone in green. Massive area.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I just want to let you know that, and it picks up many of these R2 and R1, almost all of them, districts, right? Okay, I want a clarification on that, because if they did that, then if that motion went through, then it would have to be restructured for every one of these little defined neighborhood communities geographically. Is that what I'm hearing?
I guess that would
to
be
say the peninsula. It's a loosely
I know,
used
that would have
term.
to be a debate. I mean, I don't know, that'd have to be figured out in terms of how many areas. I don't think there's going to be a specific. There's going to be 5. There's going to be 50. I think when you're in, when you're in Corona del Mar, there's a difference between Balboa Island, and there's a difference from, let's say, various areas on the peninsula. Is probably a better way to say it. And Corona del Mar within itself has various, I won't say neighborhoods, but yeah, neighborhoods within there. So I guess it goes back to my concern that you're having such a broad brush that one size fits all, and I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and just say we'll recommend that people who would want to do this and didn't in the next year, that now that they bought their house 5 years ago, now they're not able to do it because they didn't make a certain deadline, and then people who would want to sell their house, that could be limited in the future because now that their rights to build is one way one day, and the next arbitrary day, whenever these ordinances take effect, it's different another day, and it's not minor.
All right, let me have a follow-up on that last statement to staff. Procedurally, would this have a sunset clause? Or if it goes, if it gets approved here, it goes to council, if they chose to approve it, would it be 30 days, or is it a year, or or could that be inserted in the recommendation?
Commissioner Kenning, we can insert kind of an effective date, if you will, into the ordinance, but I also want to let you know this is a local coastal program amendment. So what we do here today to apply in the coastal zone is going to require a process for them to review, and that might take some time. That could take a year. It could take 15 months or slightly longer. But we can tailor the effective date of this as it would be for, say, the inland area if it were applicable. Our proposal that we're going to recommend to council is that we have the effective date of the ordinance, but projects that are already in the pipeline, they can continue forward. These are projects that have already gone through a design process, a discretionary review, or a plan check process, and then projects that would come in after that would have to comply with the new standard, and that's a fairly typical way to handle it.
Thank you.
He did bring an interesting point about sunset clause, though. I was kind of thinking of a different manner of that, where we pass it, or we recommended that council, and then the council passes it. But this is an issue that occurred 10 years ago. So in 2010, these changes came in that changed the way that housing could be built, or the allowable. And now we're going to kind of go back to 2010. I kind of like the idea maybe of some type of sunset to bring it up again for council discussion, say 10 years in 2030, to say, did our decision or council's decision in 2020, 2021, whenever this gets finally approved, was that responsible to property rights advocates, or those that want to have that ability to come back, and that makes that council in 10 years from now have to discuss that. I don't know if that's something this commission has any interest in, but when you said sunset clause, that's what I was thinking, not the ones in the pipeline. So that did perk some interest. But with that being said, we do have a motion and a second. I'm the only one that really hadn't spoke on it. I was in favor of tabling this item back in, I think, April or March, or whenever we saw this via a Zoom meeting. And I think staff has done a good job on it. I think they've toned it down a little bit. That actually makes it more palatable to others. So I'm supportive of the substitute motion. So I'll call that vote. Is that correct? We're ready to call that vote?
The motion carries 5-2 with Commissioners Lowry and Elmer voting no.
I would like to take a moment to yield the floor to Vice Chair Lowry on the process.
Just want to say, I don't want to go against council here, but I've done a lot of parliamentary and every parliamentary procedures that I've been through, a table motion is never debatable, at least according to Robert's Rules of Order. And if we have that specifically in our rules, that trumps that. But I'm going to go with our colleagues' votes here. But I do want to say that I think that that if you look at that, it's plain that a table motion is non-debatable, nor is it substitute.
And just, if that's challenged, is that challengeable in court? I do want to make sure that we're...
Well, the reality is that this is a recommendation to the city council on a code amendment. And so either way, this item could be called up by the city council. So it is not a final decision at this point. It is a recommendation to the body. I understand and recognize Vice Chair Lowry's concerns about that. We did hear a substitute motion before the debate was finalized, and so I thought the substitute motion was appropriate there.
Okay. And then I guess the only recourse is commissioners may wish to take up at the later part of this evening, they can change their mind if they were on the other side, correct?
So motions for reconsideration can be brought at the same meeting by an individual that voted with the winning side, so to speak.
So I guess, if you change your mind, you have that opportunity later. Yes, sir.
Yeah, if we're just trying to redefine all of these ideas going to council, I would really like us to pass on an idea of a sunset clause for X years when this goes through, because Commissioner Lowry and Elmore made good points. People bought something they can't afford to remodel yet. They want to remodel. It's almost like these sign ordinances that are not legal, and you give them a sunset clause. You got to get rid of it in 5, 8, 9 years, whatever it is. So that's a council decision, I would assume. I mean, if we could tag that on, I don't know, how do you do it after the vote?
I would be supportive of that. How can we re-enter that into that discussion for the council to at least say that, and I can, maybe we can bring it back to a vote, seeing that where we just saw, we can add that in there if the other commissioners are okay with that. Is that something we can go back and do, or are we kind of case closed on this?
The recommendation was to approve the code as is. I don't think that I heard any modifications to it. So I think if we did want to go ahead and incorporate those additional types of revisions, that we could certainly do so with the motion for reconsideration. Another alternative would be in the staff report to specify that these were some of the additional comments that we heard. But it would be appropriate, I think, to hear it in a motion.
Okay, I'm willing to do that. Commissioner Keding, why don't I shop the floor here to make sure we're okay with that? Commissioner Rosine?
Well, I think I just heard from council that it's a matter of the record now. It seems that could go ahead and go to council and they could make that decision.
Okay, as long as everyone's comfortable with it, I'm fine with it doing that. Yeah, then let's just proceed as is, unless somebody wants to raise their hand and say to the other. Okay, all right, great. Let's just enter that into the record, that a sunset clause, say to the discretion of the city council. But that was something we discussed here that sounded palatable to property rights, advocates, that this, can be looked at a future date.
I just want to clarify, the record should show, however, that was not agreed to by the body.
Sure.
Certainly there were a number of commissioners who, it sounds like, were supportive of that notion. I personally don't understand the need for that. As staff mentioned, there's a whole process that follows the decision made tonight, and it could take a very long time, even city part of it, but certainly the Coastal Commission piece of it. I think no matter when you make this kind of decision, there's a cutoff point. There are the people who came before and the people who come after, and the people in between who are already in process. There's never the right time. You're never going to make everybody happy.
Sure.
But I just want to go on record to say that that's certainly that's in the record if council would decide to absorb that in any decision that they make. That's obviously up to their discretion, but
Great.
just to be clear that wasn't part of the motion or those of us who support it, at least from where I sit.
Sure. Thank you, Secretary Kleiman. And for it all, it's a recommendation to the City Council, so they'll pay attention to what we're discussing here, and we'll leave it at that. So we'll move on to the next item. And that is item number 4. That's the circulation element update. And this site location is citywide. And this is a study session for all of us to become more involved and informed about the update in the process. So please, staff, if you could proceed with your presentation.
Certainly, Chair Wigand. Again, Jim Campbell, Deputy Director, and I'm going to be presenting you, in essence, a discussion item to inform the Commission about the Commission's role in the update of the circulation element. Just a little bit of background here. The City Council initiated a comprehensive update of the general plan in early 2019. They established a general plan update steering committee, and they were appointed, and the city kind of launched that effort in the fall of 2019. And what happened in orange there, there's a little detour, we got our draft arena allocation of 1,482 units. And what this is they process through SCAG, Southern California Research Area Governments, where they're allocating a demand for housing units across all the jurisdictions. Our particular jurisdiction is really 1,483. It's been subsequently changed to 1,484. And it's part of a larger allocation for the entire Southern California region of about 1.3 million. Really what we have to do is plan for the housing units there. And so that really kind of changed the focus of the amendment. So the City Council chose to narrow the scope to the housing element, the land use element, and the circulation element. And they appointed a housing element update advisory committee and appointed that, and they've been working. And so this new current direction, again, that limited scope, housing, land use, circulation. One other aspect of this was environmental justice policies. Those are mandated by by general plan element law. So we're including those policies as well. So the current direction with this housing element update advisory committee, we have a deadline to do the housing element by October 2021. Again, they're focusing on housing sites, areas where we can see increased density to apply and provide opportunities for those 4,800 units. And they're also going to be looking at the policies to support that. They're also guiding the outreach effort of the whole overall process through a subcommittee. Obviously, then the committee will act on that as well. And so we've made a subtle shift. We're providing the Planning Commission the opportunity to review the circulation element. And the principal reason behind that is because the Housing Element Update Committee is really constituted for the purpose of dealing with the housing side of this, and the circulation side was really felt more appropriate for the Planning Commission, which is really part of the charter. The Planning Commission does get involved with land use and zoning decisions, obviously, and the general plan is obviously part of that overall effort. So what we're going to be doing is, and I'll outline this for you in a moment, is the Planning Commission's role in this. And the purpose of tonight's meeting is really just to go over that and not to really get into the issues of the circulation element at all tonight. But at the end of the day, we will be asking the Commission and conducting several study sessions, and I'll discuss that in a moment. You'll also be asked to kind of comment and guide the overall effort. We're going to be having some outreach with the community, and we're going to be bringing the fruits of that to the Commission and asking for your feedback and opinion, and we'll also be having public discussions and public debate over those policies. So this slide is a little difficult, but we have basically a little over a year to produce the housing element, and so we're going to be doing community outreach with regards to where we might be able to put those units. There's a variety of strategies involved with that. I don't want to get into the details of that, but the Housing Element Update Advisory Committee will be dealing with that. And so that's really sort of focusing on housing element and then the land use changes that might need to occur as a result of that. The circulation element is a little bit different. It's really dealing with the policies of mobility. State law does have new standards that would apply, and we'll be getting into that as well. Environmental justice policies will also be reviewed, and so we'll be dealing with also environmental compliance. So the changes that we're looking at, we're going to need to be doing an EIR. So there's a lot of work to be done, and so we're basically splitting up the work. The housing side will go to the Housing Element Update Committee, and then the circulation element will come forward through the Planning Commission. We've kind of broken down the outreach phases into 3 different phases, and first phase here is really starting fairly soon. We're going to be conducting an outreach webinar, if you will, and we'll be going, the very first session, really, the Planning Commission's involvement is really towards the last side, the right side of the slide, where there'll be a Planning Commission study session in mid to late January. But I want to kind of give you an overview of the overall process that we're going to go forward with. So the first one will be a welcome webinar. We'll be going over the vocabulary, the process, the schedule, how all this fits together between the circulation element and housing. And so we'll be doing that as a live presentation, probably digitally. And I'll explain a little bit of some of the tools that we're going to do to get the word out to the community for the participation as well. And I also want to point out that we're going to be soliciting feedback and community input along the way. And so the Planning Commission's role isn't really till January, but it starts here in November. We're anticipating November 16th for this first webinar, which is really to introduce this whole thing to the community. The second module, the first module 1A, if you will, we're going to actually start looking at the existing circulation element with the community. We're anticipating a live presentation for that. It'll probably be digital as well. We'll be going over, the major aspects of the circulation element, parking policies, the roadway system, regional transportation. These are basic topics of the circulation element. And we provided you a copy of the circulation element with this packet so you can kind of familiarize yourself with how it's organized. You'll see that it's organized by these big policy areas, that there are a variety of goals, and then there are policies to achieve those goals. So there's fewer goals than policies, but there's a lot of them in there. And so we hope in that first live presentation to just start to talk about this, what's in there, and does that actually, work? Does it still? Do we need to make some changes? So it's more reflecting on the existing policies. So the second module, which would be a little bit later in December, we would do a module talking about traffic management, public transit. Again, these are existing policies of the circulation element. And again, asking the same questions. Do those policies fit? And then it provides the public the opportunity to provide feedback to staff and the consultants to what areas or issues that we might need to address as we go forward. The third module, now we're kind of, building, it's an educational process, and it's kind of building towards actually developing new policies. And so the third module, if you will, module 1C, this one might be an on-demand, and even the prior one might be on-demand, where we would do productions and place them online so people can do this at their leisure, because we know the December time periods are challenging for people's time. But there will be activities where at the city's website, where at newporttogether.com, where you'll actually be able to put input. There'll be activities there, there'll be surveys and areas where people can provide comments and feedback, and all of that information is being cataloged, so it's available for everyone to see, and it'll guide us and it'll guide you in terms of what the community is thinking about the mobility. The third module will get into a little bit of what we need to do going forward, changes in state law, the word complete streets, what does that mean? That really does mean in trying to design and develop our circulation network for all different types of modes of transportation, bicycles, pedestrians, buses, trucks, and cars, all of it. Autonomous vehicles will be coming up as well, and so what policies might we need there? And so that all will culminate with a study session. This will be your first look at it in mid to late January. We will have a study session where we will present all the feedback that we're receiving, and it'll also be an opportunity for the public to attend and speak to you in person. It'll also provide an opportunity for you folks to give us feedback on where you think we should be going based upon what you're seeing. So that's the first phase. The second phase is, another study session where we start to present the initial draft policies and goals. Again, this is building upon all the outreach that we've actually been receiving, whether it be through the online forums or the live webinars, the comments that we're going to get through emails and phone calls and any feedback that we've gotten from the commission. We'll be coming back as a study session to give the first look, very, very initial look of what the new circulation might look like. And then we'll adjourn that meeting and then actually go out to the community and provide a more detailed presentation to the community later in that month in February. Now, again, we'll be taking feedback along the way at either meeting, and so that late February will be an open forum as well. I'd like to think that we're going to be together in a room where we can have a lot of people there. We'll see how the COVID rules, what we can do in February here. But otherwise, if we can't do that, it'll be some sort of a digital engagement, if you will. And so then we'll, again, get more feedback from the community on the same information that we presented to the Planning Commission, say at the first meeting in February for you. And so, again, with all that feedback that we're getting at each stage here, we're going to come back in late March and in April or May. We do need to conclude this by May. So we'll have 2 study sessions where we'll actually first present in essence, the final draft goals and policies based upon all that feedback that we got from the first 2 phases. And we hope to have a final draft for the commission to review and the public to review concurrently together. And then obviously you can provide feedback at each one of these meetings. Now, the purpose to get to this point is that we need to get at least a really good draft of what the circulation really needs to look like. What are those goals? What are those policies? What are those changes that we need to see to the community as it relates to its mobility and circulation? Because we do need to get a stable project description, if you will, so we can conduct the environmental review. Now, just as an aside, we've got the housing element process, which is going on with the Housing Element Committee, and it's going on concurrently, and they'll be having their own public forums, if you will, for soliciting feedback on where the housing is going to go. And that'll provide input, if you will, on that project description, and then we'll conduct the environmental analysis and do the EIR, and then we'll be coming back in the fall with a final document. So, even here in May, this will not be a final document, but it'll be, what I call a final draft. And again, it'll be subject to change as we go forward, as we get new information, and then it'll actually come back to the commission later for a review and a recommendation to the City Council in the fall. So I also wanted to outline for you some of the public input opportunities. We're going to have these as live presentations or webinars. It really depends upon the timing. And we'll be recording all of this and putting it up on the Newport Together website. And at that website, there will be opportunities for the public to provide comment directly on what they're seeing. We're going to have all of these, any kind of draft information we're going to have, any kind of white papers from the consultants that might provide information and, to the community. And then people can comment on that, and they can talk about certain geographies. They can tell us, whatever it is that they want to do and see, and we'll be able to put that in there. By recording it, it'll all be available at people's leisure. But there also will be live presentations, which I think is probably really good because, we can provide direct feedback, right, and have more of a conversation with the public. So again, those on-demand presentations, engagement activities, public meetings, website activities as indicated, surveys and polls, it'll all be there, and these will be the opportunities that we'll have. We'll obviously be receiving emails and other correspondence, which we'll catalog and post. So getting the word out, we've got a variety of different ways that we're going to do that. We've got email blasts for those who've signed up for the service. We've also got our existing email services that the community uses right now through our website. We're going to have, obviously, website updates. We're going to do a fair amount of social media posting, so whether it be Facebook, Instagram, or Nextdoor seems to be a tool that the community really does enjoy using. We'll be doing council member announcements for meetings. So if we have an upcoming webinar or upcoming session, and if there's a convenient council meeting, we might have the mayor speak and provide that information so it goes out on NBTV and OE people can learn of upcoming events. And if commissioners are also involved in public meetings, whether it be an HOA meeting, that might be a monthly CDMRA meeting, that might be an announcement a commissioner might want to do, or what have you. And we'll obviously be sending out emails to the community and to homeowners associations. And obviously there'll be conversations with the community and staff, and we'll be obviously providing whatever information or answer any questions there might be. We're also going to use Newport Beach TV, and we'll also be looking at some mailers. We can actually put flyers in the utility bills, at least for most of the community, which will also keep people informed. We can also put ads in the Newport Navigator in a whole variety of different ways. So I just want to point out that we're going to be trying our best to reach as many people as possible, to get as many people engaged with the process. A lot of it's going to be coming back through the Newport Together website, which we have done some updating, and we're going to be constantly updating the Newport Together website. So what you'll see on our emails is a link to that. And so we put that on there purposely so people can see that, understand what it is, and hopefully go to that and participate. And so a lot of the information that we're going to be asking people the best way to communicate is really through that website, or obviously there's email as well. So anyway, that's what I have for you tonight. We have those study sessions. I'm available for any questions you might have or thoughts, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. And then one little spot that it mentioned on our recommendation was consider the appointment at this meeting or a future meeting of a planning commissioner to work with the outreach subcommittee of the Housing Element Update Advisory Committee. And we have in attendance Debbie Stevens, who's part of the Housing Subcommittee on Outreach, also here. So I guess commissioners, what I'm kind of looking for, I think, and staff potentially is looking for, is a commissioner who can help kind of be the bridge between the outreach and the circulation kind of initial conversations. And then as we get into the Planning Commission study sessions that are later next year, that role will cease, because the commissioner will kind of be the person who's part of these outreach. What you showed, Jim, on the red, you showed, I think, gray or brownish color was what the study sessions were, but there's like 4 meetings kind of at the middle of, or in the next couple months. Is that kind of what we're looking for, to have one of us to be involved in that discussion, kind of as a bridge between the outreach committee and then this commission?
Yes. That recommendation is for you to consider, identifying a commissioner who wants to participate. That we do have Debbie Stevens from the Housing Element Committee. I appreciate you mentioning that. And I guess the point of all that is that, this outreach plan, it is, this was finalized today, and it may be subject to change. And that was maybe something I should have indicated to you. This is the plan going forward, but that could change subtly. But we do anticipate it to really follow this framework. And I think it would be good to have a commissioner involved with the Housing Element Committee, at least the Outreach Committee, to kind of, share information, share ideas, understand how this might change, and then they can come back and report. It's just a way to provide an information flow back and forth between the committee and the commission, and that was what we were anticipating.
Okay, great. So commissioners, if anyone is interested tonight, we could make that a motion and approve you as an attendee of that outreach committee. If nobody's interested at the moment, we can maybe have staff coordinate and try to find a commissioner that we can discuss at the next meeting to see if one of you are interested. And if that can't be done, then we can still proceed essentially. But I think ideally for the public's perspective and the transparency nature of everything that we're discussing in this vision moving forward for the city, I think it probably would be important if a commissioner had interest in this outreach subcommittee related to the circulation project. So if nobody is interested tonight, maybe just kind of keep it in your head for the next week, that maybe one of staff members might call on you to see if you have interest, or they might do an informal poll, to see if there's any interest that we could discuss for the next meeting. So I don't know, staff, do we want to, or commissioners, do you have any questions for staff, I guess, moving forward? Yeah, Commissioner Lowry.
Yeah, just 2 quick questions. Has other cities implemented something like this, or is this something that's kind of taken on up and down the state, or are we kind of on the forefront? It sounds like we are on this.
What I would say is that all the communities, well, most communities in the state are actually grappling with this housing element issue. So amending the housing element is especially in the Southern California area, is almost every city is doing that. Not every city is on precisely the same schedule, but almost every community is doing the same thing. Now, different communities are handling their updates in their own unique way. We've chosen to look at land use, the housing, obviously, and circulation and environmental justice. And it may be a unique way that we're handling this. We felt it was important to do the circulation element at this time because it is a bit out of date. It also helps correlate the land use element and the changes, at the same time. It gives us an opportunity to do the impact analysis. Do we have the mobility that we need to accommodate all that housing? And I think that was really the reason why we wanted to do it all at the same time. But it is probably, I don't have another example that somebody's doing circulation and housing at the same time.
It sounds interesting. I don't know if there was anyone else. And my second question, and I say this in all honesty, is I'm a person who recycles religiously. You're going to buy an electric car, but one of the fourth elements was environmental justice. What is that definition, and what are we expected to implement with per that definition? Because I really, it's very broad to me, and maybe you could, if there's either a city kind of goal for that or definition or state, just so we know what that expectation is.
Certainly. The general plan law requires that the city do an environmental justice element or environmental justice policies throughout the various elements when you change two or more elements. And so in our case here, we're anticipating at least 3. And so we felt it was important to put that forward at this time. Now, what environmental justice really truly means is, we really need to kind of start addressing some disadvantaged communities, and that's actually a term that is defined in certain geographies. The disadvantaged community in Newport Beach is really an industrial property up near Costa Mesa. And these are areas that have, they're subject to pollution, or they're subject to other environmental factors that really kind of, I'm not sure they impact that particular community. And so they want the city to come up with policies to help address those issues in that community, whether there is a food desert there, or there's issues with education, or there's issues with pollution. We want to try to develop policies that promote, bringing those communities up in an equitable and fair manner. Now, the general plan law really talks to those disadvantaged communities. It's a very defined term, but the term environmental justice has a much more significant meaning in the coastal zone. And I'm not suggesting that we're going to create a whole new policy, but at the end of the day, we really do need to kind of broach that, because we do need to be providing fair and equitable treatment of all populations in our land use regulations, and that's also part of what environmental justice really means. And so I wasn't prepared for that question, but I hopefully that answers it.
No,
there's a lot to it, and it is something that we haven't necessarily figured out which body is going to be dealing with that. We're going to have to deal with those types of concepts in both the circulation element, the land use element, and the housing element. So I think it may become part of the circulation element, making sure that we're servicing all populations in the community.
Yeah, and that's helpful, because I don't know if we're talking more in terms of the environment, or as you said, yes, that's part of it, but also as it affects various different populations and communities. So that was really helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions from staff? Okay, I'll open the public comment to those here in the chambers. And just staff, while Mr. Mosher's coming down, do we have any phone calls? Okay.
Thank you, Chair Wygand, members of the Planning Commission. My name again is Jim Mosher. First, we saw a very impressive list of what's going to happen through the Newport Together website. I sincerely hope all of that happens, but if any of you followed the first attempt at a general plan update last year, the Newport Together website did not engage a whole lot of people, as far as I could tell at that time. So I'm hoping it will work better. Although I'm not totally optimistic about that, because if you look at the status of the circulation element on the Newport Together website right at this very moment, it mentions that the date of this meeting before the Planning Commission is yet to be determined. And it tells people to look forward to the workshops in October, which we now understand are probably in November. So make of that what you will. And I would also like it to be clear to you that when you read in the staff report, the decision has been made that the city intends to use the Planning Commission as the deliberative body to guide the circulation element update. The City Council actually, as the staff report says, gave that task to the Housing Element Update Committee. And neither the City Council nor that committee has ever taken a vote to turn the matter over to you. So it's not quite clear how the city gave this responsibility to you, but they seem to have done that. My concern about that, among others, is that in doing so, we seem to have lost perhaps one level of independent review. Earlier, you talked about the zoning code that came out of the earlier general plan update back in the early 2000s. In that case, we had independent citizen committees that heard the input and drafted kind of the general plan elements at that time, our current circulation element. Then the Planning Commission reviewed their work, and then the City Council reviewed that. So as you being the body that's developing the element and then going to make a recommendation about whether it's a good element or not to the City Council, we've kind of lost something in that process. And then the final comment I have is a kind of a lack of a big picture understanding of what your task is. When this task was given to the Housing Element Update Advisory Committee, they were going to update the circulation element just to accommodate their changes to the housing element. And I'm not sure from the presentation now and the white paper that you've been given, it sounds like, and perhaps the city is overdue for a comprehensive update. So that committee is doing a very focused update of the housing element. You seem to be asked to do a comprehensive update of the circulation element, all these things about that are unrelated to the RENA problem that we have. And I'm having a little trouble grasping how you can do the comprehensive update of the circulation element without having that tie into a comprehensive update of the remainder of the general plan. So I have a few confusions about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosier. Staff, just, kind of just go over a little bit, if you don't mind, the housing committee, how it kind of got, they've got their hands full. So I think are they asking us to kind of tackle this, or is this, staff, you're kind of recognizing that the Planning Commission is a better angle for this?
I think you actually hit the nail right on the head with what you just said. The Housing Element Subcommittee was really constituted with the purpose of, yes, it's the council's resolution does put the circulation element under the purview of the Housing Element Update Committee. I think when they constituted the committee, it's really more housing experts, and their task is very, very large. And so they felt it would be more appropriate, or at least the chairman felt it would be more appropriate to have another body take care of this. Now, given the fact that the Planning Commission's role is really in land use, but it's also in the general plan, and the circulation element is part of the general plan, and so staff felt it was important to have an oversight body kind of guiding the policy development for the circulation element, and it was the logical body to provide this to. So, and so the decision was made just to bring it to the Planning Commission so that we can continue forward on the schedule. And we do have a very difficult schedule to get this all done. We're trying to get it all done by the end of 2021. And creating a separate body to do this just wasn't really something that we could do. I guess I don't share Mr. Mosier's concern about the loss of an independent review committee. I think that's what the Planning Commission will be here to do. Also to listen to the public, listen to staff, and listen to all of the input that is garnered through the various sessions that we're planning, and then provide us guidance, objective guidance on this. At the end of the day, the staff's going to go back with all of that guidance and then prepare the drafts, and then the Commission will have the opportunity to provide a recommendation to City Council in their independent capacity. Now, in terms of Mr. Mosier's kind of lack of big picture of what this amendment would be, we are actually looking at an entire overhaul of the circulation element. Several years ago, the legislature adopted changes that require us to evaluate our streets and our mobility in a different way. And we want to make sure that we have our complete streets, in essence, streets that are designed for all different types of mobility. I think we actually do a very good job of that, but I think we do need to recast what we are doing in a new light. And this also gives us an opportunity to evaluate those policies and goals to see if they're still right for the community. Again, the last time this update was happening is 2006, and so it's been 14 years. We really haven't gone back through in a comprehensive way to see if there's anything that needs to change. We have emerging technologies that are coming forward, and so we are looking at a fairly comprehensive, if not an incomplete rewrite of the circulation element. So hopefully that provides Mr. Mosier some clarity on what we believe the scope of this will be. So hopefully that addresses Mr. Mosier's comments.
Great, thanks. And I just wanted to reemphasize that in the phase 4, there were 4 public meetings, not planning commission hearings, but 4 public meetings. So that's why I think one commissioner from this body that would attend that section in that phase 1, those 4 meetings, kind of would give it credence to what you're bringing to something that's a public meeting, and then you could then either report out or at least have been a participant of that public meeting before we then come into the study session that it looked like 3, 4, 5 of those we would essentially be hearing over time. So it'd almost be like the resident expert from this commission kind of would report out to the rest of us. So I don't know everyone's expertise on traffic and things like that, but we're kind of tasked as essentially policymakers in this committee or this commission. So we kind of signed up for it. So I would hope that somebody might have some interest. So sorry to ramble on while you're standing here.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Charles Klob. Like Mr. Mosher, I can find no way that this was properly assigned to this body by the council. I can tell you that there's members of the council that have no knowledge that you've been assigned this task, and I'm sorry that's not your fault, but I find fault with it. Secondly, I urge you in how you proceed here that you make sure those meetings that you're having you're being offered to have allow interactive discussion, not 3 minutes of one-way communication that doesn't have any interaction by the public. That won't cut it. And then lastly, throughout this process, you're going to be asked to consider the 2014 Bicycle Master Plan. The 2014 Bicycle Master Plan hasn't been updated or looked at since 2014. None of you were probably around here then, and it did not anticipate electric mobility. The Bicycle Master Plan needs to be updated before it's considered to be included in our circulation element, and no one's looking at that now. Thank you.
Thank you.
So since I was here, I just thought I would say hi. My name is Debbie Stevens. I'm with the Housing Element Update Committee. And when this first started off, the whole general plan process first started off, it was very exciting because we were going to be looking at all elements. Everything was on the table. We had a bigger picture. It would have been really nice to implement it that way. And I think it was very exciting when it started off. Unfortunately, the state kind of threw us curveballs, and so we've had to kind of readjust, and things that were priority have to get done first. So we are looking at the available housing sites and what's feasible at the moment, and that's kind of what our subcommittee is starting at doing, as well as doing some of the community outreach and starting to come up with the plans to do the community outreach. I do think that throughout this process, the housing element is going to drive the process, because that's where the sites are coming from, and where a lot of the land use changes will come from. And then the transportation part will come from it. So all 3 of these are very tied together. And I do think there's a lot of room for collaboration in doing some of this stuff at the same time, especially some of the outreach, even though the elements themselves will be a little bit different. But I do think there's a lot of work ahead. But we've got to get it done. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Yeah, I think you lend a lot of credibility to the process, and you have community engagement 101 skills. So I think you would making a fine asset to this body, and we appreciate your service. So thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. and staff, this is just a receive and file unless we have a commissioner that wants to stand forward at the moment, but that's it, right? We can have more commissioner comments, though, if anyone has any more questions. Yes, Commissioner Kenny.
Yeah, throwback comment. Where we stand with the legal challenges to the RENA numbers? I thought several cities band together to.
Yeah. Commissioner Kenning, the city is drafting, we are currently drafting an appeal of our RENA number. A variety of cities are doing that. I'm not aware of any particular litigation that might be coming forward. And right now we're going through the appeal process. On October 13th, we'll be presenting the appeal letter and getting authorization from council to file that appeal.
Thank you.
Okay. Any volunteer? Yeah, Commissioner Lauer.
I was gonna say, Tony, if this does go through, we will probably be calling you a lot on traffic questions. So, yeah. Beware.
Any other commissioners? And seeing no volunteers, we'll just move on to the next item. Okay. All right. Next item is staff and commissioner items. Item number 5, motion for reconsideration. Are there any motions? Okay. Item number 6, report by the Community Development Director or request for matters which a planning commissioner would like to be placed on a future agenda.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Wigand. I just want to report out to the commission that on September 22nd, which is next week, we'll be going to the City Council with the Newport Airport Village project. That was that planned community for housing up near the airport area. If approved, that will become likely a housing opportunity site that will carry forward in our housing element, if you were curious. So the next Planning Commission agenda regular meeting would be October 8th. We have no business for the commission on that evening. We don't have a hearing item. We do have a heavier agenda on the 22nd of the month, October. 2 of those items are on consent, so I think we'll be able to get through them a little easier than the 6 items that it might represent. So we have 2 appeals of some small cell items, conditional coastal development permits issued for some small cell telecom items, and a restaurant, and 2 encroachment permits and the expansion of Chihuahua, if you will. So that's coming forward on October 22nd. And that really, I do want to make one introduction here this evening. Well, first of all, before I get to the introduction, I want to let you know that the city manager allowed us to go through a recruitment process. We've had a variety of vacancies over the last year. We have 2 brand new planning technicians who just started within the last 2 weeks. So you may see them in months to come if they give a project that might come forward here. And I'll introduce them when they're ready. We do have one gentleman in the audience. His name is Matthew Schneider. He's our new principal planner. We did a recruitment after Mr. Ramirez retired. And he's here tonight, so he was observing the commission in action, but I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce Matt Schneider, and you will see him in meetings to come.
Great, thank you. Congratulations. We're a feisty bunch here, so be careful. I did have an item. Does anyone else have a? Yes, Commissioner Kenny.
Staff, just in the future, every now and then, would you give us an update on projects that had a lot of hearing discussions, and if they were approved, what the status of them? I drive by on Bristol, the old Japanese restaurant that's been there, and that was going to go into a convalescent or seniors. Just wondered, is that going forward, or some of these other ones going forward? Yeah, you don't have to do it tonight, but maybe at the next meeting, just kind of.
Yeah, what I can do in future reports is report back on some of those major projects. I'm not aware that project is not going forward, but I don't have a status for you tonight. And I'll kind of stick to the larger projects, that maybe the controversial ones, if you will, or significant ones. I can do that on future agendas.
Thank you.
I just wanted to bring up, there's been a lot of movement in the Dover Shores area about speed limitations, and there was an unfortunate fatal on Commodore several months ago that it seems like there's a petition out for speed bumps in the neighborhood. Tony, could maybe the next meeting either brief us, or you can brief me now, or just give an update. Like, what's the process on that? I've had a lot of residents ask me about it. just, they want to slow down that street. And there's been a couple fatals in Newport recently, so I know speed is on the minds of a lot of residents.
Yes, we have a completed plan, Newport neighborhood traffic plan for Dover Shores and Mariners. And that was completed last year. It's been out into the community, and the process in the city council policy is to have a petition to have any type of traffic calming approved. And there's a lot of traffic calming that's being proposed in those neighborhoods, a lot of what we call speed cushions, which are similar to speed bumps. So there has been a lot of petitioning going on in the neighborhood. I'm not sure if you've seen it or your neighbors. It's a large area, so a lot of signatures are needed, but I know they're well into the process of getting the petitions done. So I'm anticipating, I'm waiting to see something come back from the neighborhood as far as support for the traffic calming, but that's where we are right now.
Great, thank you. Is there a percentage that the residents have to?
In the council policy, it's 70% of the streets that have proposed traffic calming.
Okay. Yeah, there's just a lot of angst in the neighborhood, a lot of signage right now. There's more green and white signs than there are political signs, and I find it they're very unified on it. So thank you, Tony. Okay.
Real quick, if I could, Chair.
Sure.
Tony, while you're up there, I want to thank you for finally getting those no right turn signs at Ford and MacArthur that are red with a slash.
Yes.
People can see it now.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, great. And I'll, if there was any public comment on anything on that. Great. I'll move on to item number 7, excused absences. Any requests from commissioners? Okay. We're adjourned.